But no matter where they came from or why they came, the single unemployed in Vancouver learned you can't get anywhere by begging. You had to get out and fight for it.
And fight we did. Ours was a comradeship that was built on shared hardship. No matter how often the press and the politicians pointed to the Red Menace, no matter how often they pointed to the direct link between our single unemployed organization and the Communist Party, we kept on. We asked questions.
We wanted to know why there were no jobs, why we had to leave home so the still younger ones could eat. What caused the Depression? Karl Marx described the Depression as the crisis of overproduction, but we changed that. We called it the crisis of underconsumption. We had nothing.
The whole situation was becoming a political bombshell, and demonstration after demonstration were brutally dispersed by mounted city and provincial police. Letters to the editor, thousands of calls to the mayor and aldermen. Church groups protested police brutality. Block and neighborhood councils were formed. Relief officers were swamped with delegations, each with their own set of complaints and demands. People were no longer suffering in silence, and everywhere the single unemployed were the most active.
Why don't I work like other men do? How the hell can I work when there's no work to do? Hallelujah, I'm a bum. Hallelujah, bum again. Hallelujah, give us a handout to revive us again. Well, I like the boss, he's a good friend of mine, and that's why I'm starving out on this bread line. Hallelujah, I'm a bum. Hallelujah, bum again. Hallelujah, give us a handout to revive us again.
And it was General A.G. McNaughton's 1932 scheme to form and bring relief camps under the Department of National Defense that ultimately framed the Tory government's policy to deal with the hundreds of thousands of single unemployed.
We were literally starved into camps or coerced. When you got picked up for vagrancy, you could get a suspended sentence if you went to a relief camp.
Yeah, I have longshored and locked around Vancouver most of my life. So like any other unemployed stiff, I go to the Hastings Relief Office. And a guy that works there calls me names even I hadn't heard before, tells me to go back to the reservation, and sends me packing with a shove and nothing to eat, needless to say. So up to the camps I went. I met all kinds up there, old union types from England, young Ukrainians and Finns who've been starved off the farms in Saskatchewan or around Nelson. All kinds.
When we got to camp, what did we get? We got a set of work clothes, army rations, a bar of soap, towels, and a bunk in a tar paper shack. These Spartan military conditions cost the government $1.17 per man per day, and that included our wages of 20 cents a day.
There was no electricity, no books, no newspapers, no magazines, no radios, no education, no compensation for injuries, no health care, no right to vote, no right to organize. What we didn't have could fill books.
And our relief camps, called slave camps by the boys, were from Vancouver Island to the Alberta border. They were isolated from the urban centers, and the work was basically meaningless.
I remember back then looking at the timber around us at Squamish, watching the phenomenal salmon run up the river, seeing the abundance in resources that was all around me. I can remember thinking then something was fundamentally wrong with this government and this society.
Well, some of us worked in the mines before the Depression. I'll tell you, a miner's not going to lay down and starve to death, not in any capitalist country today. And one time near the beginning, we get into a camp and we see all these old wooden bunks and straw mattresses. And we set fire to them in the yard and go down to the foreman of the camp and say, look here, we need proper beds, proper dishes, and proper food. Beefsteaks and ham and eggs, because we're not staying here otherwise. You go and get it, and if you don't, well, don't bother coming back, because Sammy over here's a mind to put you on a raft on the North Thompson. So we go and stay across the ways on Indian land. They take us in. Anyhow, a train comes down from Edmonton the next morning, and they unload mattresses and pots and pans and saucers, the real ones. It's just as well, because all the cruddy tin ones had gone to their watery grave. What I mean is there was organizing from the beginning.
But it was the establishment of the Relief Camp Workers' Union that transformed local protests and nightly discussions into a movement that changed the history of this country.
In many ways, the Relief Camp Workers' Union was simply a continuation of the Single Unemployed Workers Association. It was still in the same hall and affiliated to the Workers' Unity League. The camp workers, it was an organizational light at the end of a very long and dark tunnel. Cards and stamps were printed. Dues were 5 cents a month. An 8-page mimeograph newspaper called the Relief Camp Worker was issued regularly. The paper was the greatest single organizational force the Relief Camp Workers had. It was kind of an invisible contact amongst all the workers in all the camp.
In 32, the military get control of the relief camps. After that, we have to sneak in to organize, but we do. And if you're caught, it's the blacklist. They stamp a big G on your card, and that's it. You stay in Vancouver and starve. G. It's a funny way to spell agitator.
When you went back to the relief camp office, you couldn't use your own card or your own name, so you made up another. Often, men had a dozen names. The Tellier brothers, Jerry and Louis, changed their names to Jerry Winters and Louis Summers. They said they'd already been through spring and fall.
They can't stop us. We strike those camps over bed bugs, because sick men can't get medical attention, because blacklisted men are kept out of camps in the dead of winter to freeze to death. But the more we protest, the more men join us.
You could see guys sometimes, they didn't want to organize with anyone different, but they got over it. Up around Salmon Arm, I was sure proud it was 2 young kids from the reserve on horses that led the May Day parade that year.
By the spring of 1935, we were ready. Most of the camps in BC were organized, and we held a 2-day conference on March the 15th in Kamloops.
We set 7 demands to lay before the federal and provincial governments. Simple requests, really. The right to vote, the ending of the blacklist system, the right to organize, but we simply wanted work with wages.
We decided to call a general strike of the relief camps on the 4th of April, 1935. The men would stage a mass walkout from the camps to press for their demands.
We met Arthur Slim Evans, most of us for the first time. Arthur was sent to us by the Workers' Unity League. At 42 years of age, he was the stuff that working-class heroes were made of.
He was a journeyman carpenter and a member of the Carpenters' Union. He'd been a member of the IWW, the Wobblies. He'd been shot in the leg for his part in the Ludlow coal miners' strike in Colorado. He sometimes walked with a limp. But he'd worked with and learned tactics from 3 of the most militant trade union leaders of the time, Big Bill Haywood, Ginger Goodwin, and the immortal Joe Hill.
He'd organized the miners around Drumheller into the one big union. He'd been jailed in Prince Albert for, as he said, using funds to feed hungry people instead of sending it to a bunch of pot-bellied business agents in Indianapolis. He was tall and slim, a forceful speaker, and he had more guts than a slaughterhouse.
He was fresh out of jail for his union activity in and around Princeton. He was provincial organizer for the Workers' Unity League. He was a communist, and he was my dad.
When your luck's run down to 0 and you're hungry, cold, and broke, then you meet someone who helps you see who's got a plan you can believe, with the guts to stand and fight and lead, give you hope again.
I'm Slim Evans. When the Workers' Unity League asked me to help the single unemployed men, I was ready for it. I'd heard McNaughton on the radio, Projects have been directed to the breaking up of the congestion of the single homeless men in the principal centers of population. If these had not been dispersed, it is hardly conceivable that we would have escaped without having recourse to military force to suppress disorder. What he was saying was, there's going to be war in the streets. Well, they've got their war.
All the guys there being so much younger, Slim Evans kind of stands out as their dad. And they think, oh, we got a good father here in Vancouver. He'll show us how to go about it.
Slim Evans was big on discipline, and I always agreed with him. He politely told us at the time,
You guys are not going to get nowhere, get no food, nothing, unless you learn to live together, move together, unite yourselves. If you're together, then you can get the married people in the cities behind you.
He told those boys, no fighting, no stealing. He said never to wreck the buildings that other workers had made with their hard sweat and labor.
Arthur assigned each of us to 3 divisions. Each division was about 500 strong. Each had separate headquarters. We held meetings every day. We voted on everything. It was the most democratic organization that I've ever belonged to.
And on April the 7th, strike leaders sat down with representatives of more than 40 organizations, and thus was formed the Action Committee, which mobilized so much support for the strikers. Within a week, the Action Committee organized a tag day, even though the city refused to permit, and the collection topped $5,500.
My name is Sarah. I am a member of the Mothers' Council and the CCF Women's Section. We women have been organizing for 5 years to fight evictions and hunger. Those are our boys, our sons, nephews, and brothers. They've come down from the camps without a cent, hundreds of them. One even dropped dead of hunger right on the street.